I was 17 when I babysat for the Whitakers. That was the last time I ever took a babysitting job. And after you hear what happened, I think you'll understand why. They lived on the edge of town, in one of those newer developments that try too hard to look quaint. Every house had shutters that didn't work, fake brick, and porch swings no one used. It was quiet, too. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're on display when you're outside. I hated how far it was from the main road. You had to drive through almost a mile of winding, wooded street to even see the nearest gas station. It felt removed. Like if something happened out there, no one would know. No one would hear. The Whitakers were nice enough. David, the dad, was polite in that weird, distant way some men get around teenage girls. Rebecca, the mom, was more hands-on. She walked me through everything when I got there. How to work the stove, which remotes worked which TVs, how to reset the Wi-Fi if it dropped. Their daughter, Riley, was 6, and honestly one of the easiest kids I'd ever watched. She was polite, a little quiet, but sweet. She clung to her mom when I first arrived and didn't let go until the last possible second. I should have paid more attention to that. They left around 6:30. Dinner was already made, mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs, so I just had to heat it up and make sure Riley ate. She did, in silence, her tiny legs swinging under the bar stool while I watched her from across the island. At one point, she looked up at me and asked, completely deadpan, "Do you lock the doors when you're alone?" I laughed a little and said, "Yeah, of course. Why?" She shrugged and went back to eating like it didn't mean anything. But it stuck in my head. Around 8, I got her ready for bed. Bath, teeth brushed, jammies, the whole deal. She didn't protest, but when we got to her room and I turned out the light, she grabbed my wrist before I could leave. "He was at the window last time." I blinked. "Who?" "The man." I crouched down beside her bed. "What man?" Her face stayed blank, almost bored. "The one who watches." I tried not to show how weird that made me feel. "When did you see him?" "Last time Mommy and Daddy went out. He had a camera." I stood there in the dark for a while after that, just thinking, trying to decide if she'd seen someone for real or if this was a story she'd heard or something she imagined. I checked the windows, closed the blinds tightly, and even peeked out into the backyard. It was still and empty, just a big lawn leading into a black tree line. At 9:30, I was curled up on the couch watching a show on Netflix, volume low, when I thought I heard something. A soft bump from the back of the house. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. Maybe the house settling. I unmuted the show, tried to shake it off. Another bump, this time sharper, like something tapping glass. I paused the show again and turned around to face the back of the house. The living room had a clear view down the hallway to the sliding glass doors that led to the backyard. They were closed, blinds drawn. Still, I stood up and started walking that way. The lights in the hallway were off, and it felt like stepping into a tunnel. Every instinct I had was telling me not to go, but I couldn't ignore the fact that something didn't feel right. I reached the sliding door, put my hand on the curtain's edge, and slowly peeled it back just enough to peek out. Pitch black. Nothing. I slid the curtain fully open. My reflection looked back at me in the glass. I didn't see anything outside. I even stepped up and cupped my hands around my face to cut the glare and look harder. Still nothing. I checked the lock. Still engaged. I turned around and nearly screamed. Riley was standing in the hallway behind me, wide-eyed. "Did he come back?" she asked. "Jesus, Riley, you scared me," I exhaled, trying to calm my heart. "There's no one out there." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He doesn't like being seen." I tucked her back into bed, double-checked her windows, and left her door cracked just a little. Then I started turning on more lights around the house. Something about that conversation, it felt less like a kid's imagination and more like memory. I texted my boyfriend, told him I was creeped out, and asked if he could swing by for a bit. He was working late and said he'd try, but not to count on it. By 10:15, I was back on the couch, TV playing again, when the security system chimed. Side door open. I froze. I hadn't opened any side door. I grabbed my phone and opened the app that controlled the system. The side door was listed as open. I moved to the hallway, this time slow and careful. I passed the kitchen and the dining room and reached the mudroom where the side door led to the driveway. It was open about 3 inches. Not fully, but enough. I stared at it. Then I closed it, locked it, turned the deadbolt. My fingers were shaking as I rechecked the house, every door and window, trying to reassure myself. Maybe it hadn't been shut all the way earlier. Maybe it just looked closed. But I was sure I'd checked them. At 10:38, my phone buzzed again. Motion detected, backyard. The camera feed was black and white and grainy, but it was clear enough. A shape moved across the yard. A man, tall, dressed in black, walking straight toward the house. I didn't even think. I bolted up the stairs, grabbed Riley out of bed, and locked us in the master bedroom. It had a lock on the door, plus a deadbolt and a full set of blackout curtains. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. Riley clung to me, silent. I called 911. The dispatcher was calm, told me to stay on the line, asked for the address. I gave it, told her someone was in the yard, that I was babysitting, that we were upstairs and locked in. While I was on the call, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a window sliding open, then a low thump. He was inside. I told the dispatcher, "I hear someone downstairs. They're inside. I swear to God, they're inside." She said officers were en route, asked me to stay quiet, asked if I had any weapons. The best I could find was a heavy ceramic lamp. I unplugged it and held it tight. Footsteps creaked on the floorboards below. Then, a voice. It wasn't loud. It didn't yell or threaten. It was calm, almost cheerful. "Really?" it said. "Come out, sweetheart." I covered her mouth before she could answer. The voice moved through the house, calling her name over and over in that sing-song tone. Drawn out. Too familiar. I pressed my ear to the bedroom door. His footsteps were getting closer. I heard him on the stairs. "Don't cry, Riley. It's okay. He just wants to see you." It took everything in me not to scream. He stopped outside the door. The doorknob rattled. Then silence. I waited, barely breathing. The dispatcher was whispering, asking what was happening, but I didn't answer. I just stared at the door. Then I heard something metallic. A faint scraping sound. He was using something on the lock. I moved us into the closet and shut the door, still holding the phone. Riley was shaking violently. I held her tight and didn't say a word. And then, bang, a bang, another, then another. He was trying to break the door down. The dispatcher said the police were almost there. That didn't help. The door groaned. I could hear the wood splintering. Then, silence. For a few seconds, I thought he'd given up. Then I heard it, the unmistakable click of the bedroom door swinging open, footsteps. Then the closet door, 1 second, 2, then pounding fists on the wood. I screamed. Riley sobbed. The dispatcher kept asking what was happening. The pounding stopped. Silence returned. Then the sound of sirens in the distance. I didn't leave that closet until I heard officers yelling from downstairs. When they opened the door, I was still holding Riley, my hands cramping from how tight I'd been gripping the lamp. The man was gone. All the doors had been relocked. No signs of forced entry. Not even prints. But the security footage confirmed it. He came in through the side door. The Whitakers got there 10 minutes later, hysterical. Turns out, it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. They'd found odd things before. Footprints near the windows, objects moved, a used tissue inside their locked car. They thought it was some neighborhood kid screwing around. But after Riley mentioned seeing someone before, they'd installed cameras and a new security system. They just didn't tell me. The police found a blanket and a duffel bag in the woods behind the house. Inside were photographs of Riley, dozens of them. Some taken through her window, others from much closer. Some of them were from inside the house. The creepiest part, the oldest photo was from almost 2 years ago. The most recent, that night. Me and Riley on the couch, watching TV, taken from behind the sliding glass door. He was right there. They never caught him. I don't know if he's still out there, watching other houses, other kids. All I know is I'll never babysit again. I took the job because I needed the money, not because I liked kids. I was 18 and saving for a beat-up Civic that my friend's cousin was selling for a few $100. The couple I babysat for, the Lanes, paid $20 an hour, cash. No taxes, no paperwork. The catch? It was a one-time deal, one night only. They just needed someone to watch their son while they attended a formal event in the city. Their house was in a wealthy, older neighborhood outside town. The kind of place with long driveways, iron gates, and those big oak trees that make everything feel a little too shadowed. The house itself was massive. Brick, 3 stories, ivy on the walls, the kind of place with chandeliers and actual oil paintings in the hallway. Their son, Ethan, was quiet. 7 years old, skinny, polite. Too polite, like someone had drilled it into him. He never interrupted, never raised his voice, and apologized constantly, even for things that weren't his fault. When I met him, he shook my hand. That should have been my first clue that something wasn't right. Mrs. Lane gave me a long list of instructions. Ethan's bedtime was 9. No sweets after 7. No screen time unless it was one of the 3 approved movies listed on the fridge. She walked me through the kitchen, the living room, the bathrooms. Then she showed me the security system panel and how to arm it. She said, "You probably won't need to. We've never had a break-in, but just in case." Her husband was waiting outside in the car, already dressed in a tux. She gave Ethan a kiss on the head and said, "Be good. Do what she says. You know the rules." Then she looked at me and said, "He's a very sensitive boy." They left at 5:30. At first, it was fine. We played a board game. He showed me his toy dinosaurs. I microwaved some chicken nuggets for dinner. I remember he sat at the table with perfect posture, cutting each nugget with a fork and knife. What 7-year-old does that? He was quiet through most of it, but I didn't press him. Some kids are just shy or awkward. I've met a lot of them. At 8:30, I told him to brush his teeth. He obeyed immediately. When I came to check on him, he was standing in the hallway outside the bathroom, pale and stiff. "There's someone in the attic," he said. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I heard it earlier. Walking. Then again just now. I always hear it." I crouched to his level, trying to keep my tone light. "Ethan, are you trying to scare me?" He shook his head so fast it looked like he was vibrating. "No, they always tell me not to talk about it, but they're not here now." My stomach twisted. "You think someone is in the attic right now?" He nodded. I should have called the parents, or the police, but I didn't want to overreact and look like an idiot. Instead, I walked him to his room, tucked him in, and said I'd check the attic, just to prove no one was there. He grabbed my wrist as I stood up. "Don't go alone." I forced a smile. "I'll be right back." The entrance to the attic was a panel in the ceiling of the upstairs hallway. You had to pull it down and then unfold the narrow wooden ladder. I didn't have to go all the way up, just enough to shine my phone flashlight around and show him it was empty. I pulled the panel down. The wood creaked loudly. Dust rained down on my hoodie. I climbed a few rungs, lifted my phone, and peered around. Nothing. Just insulation, exposed beams, and boxes. Still, I called out, "Hello?" No answer. Satisfied, I climbed back down and pushed the ladder back up. When I turned around, Ethan was standing behind me, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "I told you," he whispered. "No one's up there," I said. His face stayed blank. "They don't always show themselves." That's when I decided not to push it. If this was some weird game or coping mechanism, I wasn't going to feed into it. I put him to bed and stayed downstairs, scrolling on my phone with one of the approved movies playing in the background. Around 10, I got up to grab a soda from the kitchen. The attic door was down again. I froze. I was sure I'd pushed it up. Not just pushed, latched it. I looked at the stairs, then at the open attic. I didn't go up. I locked the back door, turned on every light in the house, and sat on the couch with my legs pulled up tight. I texted my friend Carrie and told her something weird was going on. She texted back a meme and said to chill out. At 10:42, I heard something fall upstairs. A soft thump, then footsteps. Not fast ones, slow, careful, like someone didn't want to be heard. I went to the base of the stairs and listened. They stopped. I called out, "Ethan?" No answer. "Ethan, if you're out of bed, you need to answer me." Still nothing. I climbed the stairs, forcing myself not to think about how dark it felt up there, even with the lights on. His bedroom door was open. The bed was empty. I looked inside the closet. Under the bed. Gone. I checked every room on the second floor, then the bathrooms. I finally found him crouched in the linen closet, knees to his chest. "Ethan," I whispered. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer, just shook his head violently. "You have to come out." He didn't move. I touched his shoulder, and he flinched. That's when I saw it. The attic stairs were down again, except this time, there were footprints on the carpet, leading away from it. Bare footprints. I called 911. I told them I thought there was someone in the house. I didn't mention the attic. I just said I was babysitting and someone had broken in. The dispatcher stayed on the line, told me to find a safe place and lock the door. I pulled Ethan out of the closet and took him downstairs into the master bathroom. It had a lock and no windows. I shut us in and locked it. That's when Ethan whispered something that still makes my skin crawl. He's going to be mad that I told. Who? I asked. He didn't answer. The dispatcher stayed on the line until the cops knocked. I didn't open the door until they verified themselves. When we stepped out, the house looked the same, but the attic stairs were back up. No sign of forced entry. No sign anyone had been there, until they found the crawl space. It was hidden behind a loose wall panel in the attic. Inside was a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, and a collection of toys. And photos. Photos of Ethan, sleeping, eating, playing in the yard. All taken from angles that didn't make sense, unless someone had been inside the walls. The worst photo, the one that made me leave the room, was a shot of Ethan lying in bed with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The shadow of someone's hand hovered over his face. The police never caught the guy. They think he'd been squatting there for months, maybe longer. Long enough to learn the family's schedule, their habits, their routines. Long enough to become obsessed. I don't babysit anymore. I took a babysitting job last fall for a couple named the Solomons. I found their listing on a private care site that a lot of off-the-books families use. People who don't want questions, just results. It paid well. Too well. They wanted someone for a single night from 6 to midnight. No recurring schedule, just a one-time deal. The ad said their son, Max, was 9 years old, nonverbal autistic, and required minimal interaction. It warned against unexpected behavior, sudden noises, or touching him without permission. When I got to their house, something felt wrong immediately. It wasn't dirty or disorganized. The opposite, it was sterile. Ultra-modern architecture, polished concrete floors, echoes in every room, white furniture, bare walls. It didn't feel like anyone lived there, least of all a child. What really got me was the camera. Not a Ring, not a baby monitor. A real, ceiling-mounted security camera in the center of the living room. An industrial black dome, like you'd see in a hospital or interrogation room. It was angled perfectly to capture the whole space. The couch, the open kitchen, and the play area marked by a sad little foam mat and one tub of spotless plastic blocks. Mrs. Solomon saw me looking at it. For safety, she said. Her smile was too tight. And liability. The feed's private, just local. I didn't believe her. Max was already on the floor, fiddling with the blocks when I arrived. He didn't look up. He didn't respond to my voice. Didn't flinch when the front door opened or closed. He moved slowly and methodically, sorting blocks by color and shape with mechanical precision. Mr. Solomon handed me a typed sheet of instructions. Actual paper. No app. Do. Speak calmly. Never raise your voice. Keep a routine. Stay in the main room at all times. Do not. Ask him questions. Move or rearrange his toys. Let him near the basement. The basement, I asked. It's off limits, Mr. Solomon said. Locked. Don't worry about it. That was all they gave me. Then they left. The second the door shut behind them, it felt like the air changed. Not like I was alone, but like I was no longer in charge. Max didn't move for over an hour. He just continued to arrange his blocks. No humming, no self-stimming, no signs of distress. Just silent repetition. He never looked at me, never made eye contact. He was so still, I found myself holding my breath just watching him. I tried to engage once, asked him if he wanted anything to eat. He didn't respond. He didn't even blink. So I gave up, sat on the edge of the couch, kept my phone low, tried not to make noise. But every so often, I caught it. He'd tilt his head just slightly and look at the camera. Not glance, look with intention. It made my skin crawl. At 7:40, he stood up and walked into the kitchen. No warning. Just got up and walked like he was following a cue I hadn't heard. He opened the fridge, took out a single slice of plain white bread, and sat on the cold tile floor to eat it. One bite. Wait. One bite. Wait. It wasn't a snack. It was a ritual. I stood behind the island, unsure if I should step in or just observe. When he was finished, he picked up the crumbs and ate those too. When he looked up again, it was at the ceiling, at the camera. Then he smiled. A twitch, not a grin, just enough to twist his mouth unnaturally. and then it was gone. At 8, he walked straight to the hallway and stopped at the basement door. My heart started pounding. "Max," I said softly, not moving. "Let's stay out here, okay?" He rested his hand on the doorknob. It didn't turn. But he didn't try to open it. He just stood there, perfectly still, staring at the door like he was listening to something behind it. Then he slowly looked over his shoulder and locked eyes with me for the first time. No fear, no confusion. He watched me. I was the one who looked away first. When I looked back up, he was gone. I found him back on the floor with his blocks. But they were different now. He wasn't sorting them. He was hiding them, slipping them into places he shouldn't have, under couch cushions, inside shoes by the door, behind the air vent. I watched in silence as he palmed one and dropped it into the back pocket of a jacket hanging on a chair. I opened my mouth to say something, and then, click! The camera above us turned. Just a little. A soft mechanical twitch, like it had recalibrated. Max didn't even flinch. He placed the last block inside a mug in the sink, wiped his fingers on a towel, and sat cross-legged on the tile. I stood frozen in the kitchen, my hands shaking. At 8:17, I went to the bathroom. When I came out, the living room was completely empty. Every block gone. Every toy vanished. The mat was bare. No crumbs, no mess, no noise. Max wasn't there. I called his name. Nothing. I checked the kitchen. Nothing. The front door was still locked. Then I saw it. The basement door. Slightly open. The keyhole was still locked. But the door had been cracked just enough that it no longer sat flush in the frame. I didn't go near it. I texted the Solomons. "Hey, just checking in. Everything okay?" No reply. I texted again. Nothing. At 8:42, I turned around to find Max standing in the hallway, barefoot, staring at me. I asked him quietly, "Did you go in the basement?" He blinked, slowly, then smiled. Not the twitch this time, a real smile. Then he whispered, "They lied." I dropped my phone. He'd spoken. I backed into the living room. "Max, what did you say?" He tilted his head again, looked at the camera, then back at me. "They said I couldn't talk. I felt sick." He took a step forward. "They said I was broken." Another step. "They said if I spoke, the red light would turn on." He pointed at the ceiling. I looked. The little red light on the camera had started to blink. I grabbed my phone and ran out the front door. I called the cops. They showed up 15 minutes later. The Solomons arrived shortly after, calm, composed, even annoyed. Said it was all a misunderstanding. Said Max doesn't talk, that I must have imagined it. They wouldn't let the officers search the basement. The cops shrugged, said without signs of danger or evidence of abuse, they couldn't do much. I was paid in full and asked not to return. 3 days later, another sitter I know, Angela, texted me. She'd taken a one-night job with the Solomons. She asked, "Did anything weird happen with the kid?" I said yes. I said, "Don't go back." She never answered. That was 3 weeks ago. She's still missing. I told the police. They said they'd look into it. I drove by the Solomon house once. Just once. There were 2 new cameras. One pointed at the mailbox, the other at the basement window. The window that now had blackout curtains drawn from the inside.